Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who helped get all of those judges moved through the Senate Judiciary Committee, is back with us. Senator Whitehouse, I want to go to your correspondence with the Judicial Conference, which has now created the news of the day, where they're saying, well, Clarence Thomas promises to do better. That's good enough for us.
Yeah, as you know, because you followed this so closely, Lawrence, I've had an ongoing correspondence with and met with them repeatedly, the Judicial Conference, for years now, to direct their attention to the misconduct of various Supreme Court justices. And by and large, I've had a pretty good response from them. Slow, for sure, cautious, for sure, but always moving in the right direction. And so this letter is a little bit hard to fathom. It's full of seeming contradictions. The letter says that judges have an obligation to amend erroneous filings that goes back 6 years. And yet they did not require Justice Thomas to go back and correct his filings for the past 6 years. They said that there was confusion, unstated confusion in the guidance about the personal hospitality rule, which is very clear. It says food, lodging, or entertainment. And it's never said transportation, and it's never been read to mean transportation. And a lot of the gifts to Alito and to Thomas have been and before Scalia, have been in the form of transportation. So there really is no way to maneuver around that other than this supposed confusion and guidance, which nobody else seems to be confused by. So that was peculiar. And then the other thing that never turns up at all is the question of the forgiveness of the $267,000 loan to Justice Thomas for his motor coach. And what's interesting about that is that if he failed to disclose that as a gift to him when he didn't have to pay the loan back, then at the same time, that's also a tax event. That is income. The day that the forgiveness legally takes place. And if he didn't declare it, then he's engaged in tax evasion. So this is a pretty serious matter. $250,000 tax evasion is a big deal. And by a Supreme Court justice, it's an even bigger deal. And so you would think that the Judicial Conference would be on high alert to try to make sure that that was sealed off. And when they don't even mention it, it's disturbing. It begins to seem that their effort here is more to clean things up at the Supreme Court and stop the bleeding, if you will, of all this misconduct than it is to actually get to the bottom of it and find out if we have a tax cheat on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and the notion that a Supreme Court justice who has ruled repeatedly on tax cases, including tax evasion cases over decades, that a Supreme Court justice would not know that a forgiven loan, a billionaire gives you $250,000 and then says to you, you don't have to pay it back. That is an income tax event, and every member of the Supreme Court knows that.
Yeah, forgiveness of a loan equals income is obvious. It is simple legal proposition that a first-year law student would be expected to understand. Food, lodging, and entertainment are not transportation is another extremely easy concept. You don't even have to be a lawyer to understand that those are different words. So here you have these very senior judges and the justices who are in theory the best and the brightest of the legal profession up on the Supreme Court, and they've gotten themselves tangled around these spectacularly easy propositions, which suggests that there's something more going on, because the propositions themselves are certainly not difficult enough to justify all this tangling.
Senator, I suspect you've been watching some football this season because I read your letter to the Democratic National Committee, and this notion of an offensive coordinator, which I'm sure occurred to you at halftime or in the middle of a game sometime, just strikes me as absolutely brilliant application of football strategy to politics. I want to read this for the audience. You've sent a letter to Democratic National Committee delegates, all of whom are going to decide who the next leader of the Democratic Party is, saying Democrats are constantly on the receiving end of a right-wing war machine. The capability gap is so great that our adversaries can rapidly and effectively deploy false narratives while we struggle to bring true ones to bear. I hope you will figure into your deliberations the opportunities that a persistent, well-run, strategic, offensive coordinator role could bring to our team and how the DNC could best support that role. The upcoming Trump administration will be a target-rich environment. Did that occur to you while you were actually watching a football game?
No, I've been pushing on this for years now. It is an intense frustration to me. As you know, because we've talked about this a lot on your show, there is an armada of right-wing front groups out there that operate in coordinated fashion, like, the keys on a piano. It's all part of the same machine. Back to the Supreme Court, we often see them showing up in flotillas of a dozen or more with coordinated amicus briefs. And this whole operation is constantly bombarding Democrats, is constantly feeding a false narrative, is constantly at war with the facts. And here we are on our side, and we have no organized operation to oppose what is perhaps the most ferocious political operation and the largest political operation America has ever seen. It is funded by these billionaires. It has unlimited money. It's quite well hidden. There are probably 100 of these organizations that they can call up, again, like piano keys. And we need to just be better. You can't just go on the field against an organized operation like these billionaires run through the Republican Party and expect that you're going to win. You've got to have some planning center of your own, some way that you coordinate, some way that you figure out who's who and you expose them for what they are. It's we could do well simply with exposure if people knew. One of my favorite stories, one of these briefs at the Supreme Court came in under the name of a front group for another front group. And it didn't disclose to the Supreme Court that it was just a fictitious name, to use the legal term, of another front group. So the scheming it's actually pretty obvious, and we should have smart people who are looking at that operation all the time and calling it out and letting the public know what's going on, that this stuff is not for real. And the capture of the Supreme Court and the flood of dark money into our politics and the success of the fraudulent climate denial operation, these aren't things that just happened. They were done. And the thing that did it, we are almost willfully blind to and helpless against. And that just has to stop. Too much damage is being done to our country.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.